So I am going to share my screen, and I'm going to walk you through a deck. Literally up to 5 minutes ago, Megan and I were finishing parts of this deck. So
it's a little busy, but I will tell you this, that in the beginning, when something is complicated and sort of like a newer thinking, I think it deserves and kind of needs more words and more description. So we're trying to say the same thing in many different ways to try to help this land better. So I'm just prefacing the fact that it's getting a little complicated.
So get prepared for a little, I would say we talked about the majority, 51%. 51% Charlie Kim.
Yes.
Right? 49% the editor Megan. Right? So if I had it my way, I would create 50-page slide decks just as a baseline and then add on from there to probably 100. Megan would find one. Yes. Right? And probably get the right one that matters. So
but we haven't had enough coffee either. Chris is watering her plants with Gatorade right now. That's how tired she is. I'm saying just this is the third shot of espresso, right? It's been a rough week with school starting and everything. So this is going to be a good class though.
Thumbs up if you can see our slides. Yes. Can you see them?
Can you see our slides?
Perfect. Okay. So there's 8 slides. On one hand, 8 is not a lot, right? Title page included. So it's 7 slides. On the other hand, this is going to be dense. This is a very difficult and yet quite important topic. So the topic we want to talk about is the foundational skill to be great at strategy and innovation. Whatever job you have today, right? Whether you're a church, musician, or you're at American Airlines in charge of some of the, pilot unions, you're at the Navy, you're at, BASF and making chemicals, right? The need to be better at strategy. And strategy and innovation go hand in hand. There is no executive, no leader today that is considered to be great at strategy and innovation is not part of it. Innovation is a hand-in-hand requirement tied to strategy today. So we're going to cover this topic in depth, and it's complicated. So hang with us if you can. Use the chat, ask questions, and we'll try to go back and as much as we can. So only 8 slides. So I'm done with 1. So hopefully that's good, but we'll see, it's kind of dense. So first quick thing, I want to bring back this individual. So Megan and I have had the fortune over the 26 years that we've run Next Jump or been at Next Jump of meeting some of the best who's who you can imagine. And I think part of what we try to do on leadership and practice is share the knowledge of just the amazing people we get to meet and talk to. So Roger Martin, who's pictured here, he did a 10-year study with the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, A.G. Lafley. And this is the book he wrote with them, the two of them wrote together. And in the 10-year study, they worked and talked to the biggest CEOs of the biggest companies to study and learn basically how to do strategy really well. And in the course of writing this book and this 10-year journey, they learned a lot about what is changing because as they did this study in the book, it was at the turn of this 100-year change moving from the industrial age, which is the 20th century. The 20th century technically began in 1900 and ended in year 2000. And the 21st century, which is now, from 2000 until 2100. The 21st century, the information age, is this 100-year change. And if you read a lot of what COVID has done, not only in the US, but to the global world, it's accelerated this change that was occurring slowly. Because what we've seen in history doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes. In history, 100-year, as in century changes, do have dramatic changes in how people operate, how organizations, how teams operate. However, the old model tends to stay alive for a good 20% into the new century. So we have talked before in previous LIP classes that 2020, 5 years ago, we predicted would be the change point. We just never thought it would change with a pandemic. So drastic. And what the pandemic has done is taken things that would take 36 months, 5 years, 10 years, and literally made it happen in a matter of days, weeks, if not a month. And so the interesting part, what Roger Martin saw was the beginnings of this change trying to show up through the eyes of big CEOs. And it was talking about strategy, what you see down on the slide, the before versus now. Worried about big companies versus actually being worried. The CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, is worried about 2 kids in the garage putting JP Morgan Chase with 300,000 employees out of business. That is the common thread they found. and how writing strategic plans versus strategy changing so quickly, producing products and services, a decision-making factory. But in the years that we've met amazing people, Roger Martin was one of the most smartest, well-versed individuals on the notion of how to do strategy. So to take his work a step further, we've talked about him in previous LIP classes. This little diagram here is probably the sum total of kind of Roger Martin's strategy view. His view of how to think of strategy, which by the way, in the 21st century, strategy and innovation are synonymous. Mm-hmm. Innovation also is synonymous with the word creativity. Creativity, I'm going to define for you the way Roger Martin shared it with us. That's making something that did not exist. Let's keep this in mind. Imagine when your strategy, which is innovation, which is creativity, has to produce something that did not exist. If you do a plan from last year, if you do a plan that belonged to somebody else and you just submitted it as is, that is not good strategy in the 21st century. In fact, that strategy may put you out of business. That is not innovation, that is not creativity. Now, people mistake that and say, well, so I have to reinvent everything new. That's also really dumb in the 21st century. We always talk about the notion of, it's like baking. Baking is interesting because by the slightest change of an ingredient in the portion of the ingredient or the sequence of the ingredient, the entire thing comes out different. Yeah. The entire thing you bake comes out different. I think of strategy, innovation, creativity like that in the 21st century. Every nuanced detail and the portion and sequence absolutely matters, but the idea of baking the exact same thing from someone else's house or someone else's enterprise into mine, someone else's life into mine, is a surefire way to fail, for one. You have to have strategy that's innovative, that's creative, meaning making something new. But Roger then also emphasized, and he spends a lot of time coaching CEOs of very large companies, that at the foundation of strategy was rigor and discipline. And what is rigor and discipline? Rigor and discipline, said another way, is a battle rhythm, is a ritual. We think of rigor and discipline tied to what you normally do on your automatic. What do you do? Your rigor and discipline is the same as rituals, as habits. Yeah. What do you do without even thought? Because it's now baked into what you do. And rigor and discipline set right is the foundation that lets you be creative, that lets you be innovative and be good at strategy. So how does that work? And the question, of course, that we spent time talking to Roger and whatnot was, what's the connection between these two? Because rigor and discipline, you can say, yeah, I want to be good at strategy, so I have a discipline of eating breakfast every morning. Well, that might not really help you enough in strategy, right? There are many things that are good. I brush my teeth. It gets rigor and discipline, but does not help me in strategy. What is it? So in research, they call it like pedagogy, the idea of curriculum. What is the content, the curriculum, that root thing that would connect between these two, that if I put that root element in my rigor, discipline, my rituals, and I keep doing that, it gets me better and better at being creative, innovative, and at strategy. And so as we dug in further and further, there's a phrase, one of our instructors, if you get a chance, some of you may have already taken, Mitchell, is our dance instructor in our New York office, and he teaches in COA, and people rave about him. The phrase that he uses all the time is, I am gonna get you comfortable being uncomfortable. This idea of I'm gonna help you get comfortable navigating the uncomfortable. Think about making something that did not exist. The idea of innovation, that is navigating uncomfortable. Think of what we've all faced in the last 6 months with COVID and what's happened, work from home and diseases and pandemics and everything. I mean, talk about learning to navigate uncomfortable. We all got launched, kind of like those circus cannons, launched into the 21st century VUCA, which is a military term, of volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We got launched into uncomfortable at such a massive, rate.
It's interesting because Mitchell is dance instructor. Some of you haven't taken his class, but in our in-person leadership academies we have everybody go through it. So you have to picture physically what it feels like to be uncomfortable and trying to learn to be comfortable when you're dancing. And the way he does it is very, let's see, animated, but with a bunch of strangers, right? Complete strangers, and you're trying to have fun, and you're trying to look good, and you're trying to do it fast, and so it's like the equivalent of innovating and being creative and thinking with other people and putting yourself out there. It's a very similar feeling to innovation and creativity. For instance, in the physical.
So think about it this way. In your rituals, as in your automatic, if you are able to go and face and practice being comfortable navigating uncomfortable on a weekly basis, consistently, not intensely, but consistently, that ritual, that rigor and discipline will make you better at being creative, being innovative, and at strategy in the 21st century, right? So I'm going to go into exactly how to do this. So the single hardest thing as an adult that is uncomfortable is learning how to be yourself. Being yourself. Now, this sounds kind of silly to some of you, but we'll go into depth and you'll start to see how hard this actually is. Being yourself looks like this, right? So one of the hardest and most uncomfortable things for us as adults is to be yourself. Why? Because we have a lot of filters. If you had no to low filter, the distance between what you think and what you say would be near zero. Have you ever, I'm sure you have friends or places in our lives we go and you can speak just unfiltered, right? I don't have to worry about being politically correct. I don't have to worry about offending someone and then the relationship ending. And you literally, as you think, you actually speak. And by the way, the stats and the data on how fast our mind thinks versus how fast we speak at around 300 words a minute, but we think at somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 words a minute, which means no matter how fast you speak, you're filtering 90%, right? So you have to think about like kind of, wait, there's a natural filter that's going to happen because you can't talk at the pace you think, right. But then you filter on top of that. And this is where the whole thing starts to break apart. As a term Megan had coined, I want to say back in 2013 or 14 called LHF. We taught it in one of our earlier LIP classes. It's called lying, hiding, faking. Think of being at a poker table. Everyone goes to the poker table and they're bluffing. They're lying, hiding, faking. The sunglasses you put that make you look like eyeballs so you can't see what my facial reaction is. Say nothing, speak nothing, like just the whole notion of lying, hiding, faking. It's a phenomenon that's well researched, that it's a trained and learned muscle.
It's like playing politics. It's very similar to playing politics, right? You get better at it with more experience.
If you ever played poker with a 5-year-old, you'll be able to kill them because they don't know how to bluff. They don't know how to lie, hide, and fake. Oh my God, I have pocket aces versus they show the truth. As we grow up, we learn to hide our emotions, what our truth is. And so we learn to LHF instead, and that muscle gets very strong. Being yourself has 2 parts to it. And think about psychology. The hardest thing about all of this is everything is tied to psychology. And there's 2 parts of psychology. There's my psychology, which is self. The idea of being vulnerable, and that word is used, and I think maybe overused, so it loses meaning in different places, is not being able to say something that's sad or makes someone cry or whatnot. Oftentimes we judge vulnerability by the impact it has on somebody else. I think of it the other way. When I think about being vulnerable, I think about how it makes me feel. When you feel like, oh my God, I just shared something with you that if you chose to, you could hurt me with that. That notion of I just said something that could make me look really stupid, really dumb, that could forever hurt my reputation, my brand. And that is vulnerable. Versus a lot of us learn as adults how to be what I call, it's like humble bragging. Like it's like bragging vulnerable. Like I can tell you a story that sounds vulnerable, then you realize it actually isn't. And so this definition, I think, ups the bar of what true vulnerability is from the self perspective. Then there's the flip side with others. I think about feedback. The notion of feedback being my reaction, but in near real time. Versus the opposite is often the time late. I'll tell you what I thought like much later, right? The classic example always is performance evaluations. Yeah, I'll tell you how your performance was really bad 9 months ago, which is why we're not promoting you. Time late feedback is awful. It's kind of cruel because I could have done something about it. but I didn't deserve your benefit of doubt that I'm tougher than you think. Give me the truth so I could correct, as opposed to you're letting me keep making mistakes. The other thing that happens poorly is the shit sandwich we talked about and how not to give feedback, right? The whole like, wow, nice shoes, right? You really suck. Nice shoes, by the way, right? Like how you sandwich the thing in the middle, right? And then of course, heavily filtered, right? You know, like this idea that being yourself, if you ultimately were yourself, you would just say what's on your mind. Despite half the time, at least, you would probably sound really dumb, offensive, right? You would actually react to other people's, whatever they say on their mind, in a way that you might offend them, piss them off, and you know whatnot. But like that would be being yourself for all truth. Yes. All of that, by the way, I'm going to look back at the top here. So right here, I'm going to call it the visceral compass. I said comfortable navigating. I like the word compass because it's navigating, right? The visceral compass is the very muscle you want to build, that pedagogy, that curriculum. And in it, so if I define it further, I think of defining visceral compass as that's your intuition, your judgment. Daniel Kahneman, a well-known researcher, calls it system 1, which is what he called fast thinking. System 2 is our logical, analytical brain, slow thinking. And to be honest, computers do that better. But the human capability that's coming alive and where the most successful leaders and organizations have more of this is system 1. Human beings having a stronger visceral compass, in very plain English, just being yourself, okay? So this is the foundation we're gonna go through, and it's a little bit harder than you think. So why is it so hard to be yourself? So some of you may have seen this diagram. It's floated around the internet for many years. And it was actually initially created talking about the millennial generation and why it's so hard for them to be themselves. So I'll let you digest this diagram, but what you're seeing here across is the idea of real people, all the stick figures, but what they project. And the ability to project. If you look on the left, Lucy's peers reality, and the crafted image Lucy's peer project publicly. And you're looking at Lucy, right, who's there at the bottom, and the gap between where she is and looking at all her peers is envy, inadequacy.
That makes you feel inferior, right?
Yes.
That's exactly the thing that makes you
and
feel
this
bad.
belief that this unicorn who's literally spewing out rainbows is real.
Yeah, it's real.
Right? It's real. And think of it this way. Lucy feels like a loser, like an oddball. She's a laggard. She's behind, right? She's behind in everything because look how well everyone is doing. And well known in research, they say the more successful people get, the greater this problem becomes. It's called being this complex of feeling inferior. Inferiority complex. Right? I even put it in small letters as opposed to big. It's like, it literally is like a psychological phenomenon that occurs, and the more successful people get and the higher up you go, this gets worse and worse.
Same thing with the imposter syndrome. I'm sure you've all heard of that, right? The more senior you get in an organization, the more you feel the need to act the part, right? Act a certain way. You got to have your stuff together.
They promoted me, so now I need to know. Yeah. I need to act like I know what I'm doing, but I have no clue. Who do you tell that to, right? When your subordinates are looking for you for what's going to happen is like, when are we going to go back to the office, or when are we going to see a vaccine or this and that? Like, all I want to say is I have no clue, right? But they want an answer, right? That sounds smart. This idea of sounding smart because there's somebody out there who sounds really smart. Yeah. And you read about it and you're like, oh, I got to regurgitate that statement. And there was an interesting study that was done. They did a big data study looking at the data of Facebook and Google, right? Two of the most trafficked internet properties, right, out there, two companies that have arguably the most traffic on the internet. And what they found in the data was fascinating, that the top posted items on Facebook versus the top searched items on Google were literally a mirror opposite of each other. The top things on Facebook was posts about how smart and beautiful my children are. And there's a lot of spouses and a lot of wives posting. So there's a lot about how strong and smart my husband is. On Google, the top search data was what's wrong with my child? Is my child retarded? What's wrong with my husband? Is my husband gay? Is my husband this? I mean, it was like the complete opposite data sets. Now, if this is the two most searched or two most trafficked properties in the world on the internet, which means when you look at the top things that we're seeing in the data in Facebook versus Google, when you post for others to see, you are LHFing. You are crafting an image you want people to see. But when you're at home alone and you get to do it in the privacy of Google searching yourself, you're doing the total opposite. Talk about schizo, right? This is actually what's happening. And why it's so hard to be ourselves is this. When you surround yourself with people who are authentic, authenticity begets authenticity.
Very contagious.
It's contagious. Likewise, if you surround yourself with LHF, LHF begets more LHF.
And this is where some people in the chat are talking, right, about how does this apply to corporate culture, and can you do this in as a person? You have to do it in small teams. Yes, it has to be done as teams, right?
Excellent.
But it's got to start with you, right? So this is where we're going to get to how this fits
so
in. But I will say, the team's also talking about how much energy it takes to LHF, right? To when you feel like an imposter, how much energy. And it's fascinating because we've taught this many, many times, but I'll just tell you this real quick data point that with brain doctors, neuroscientists, it's fascinating. It actually takes more energy to lie than to tell the truth. Like significantly more energy to lie than to be. So the notion of being yourself frees up, I think it's some crazy amount of energy. I forget all the stats in my head, but it's like 2/3 of your energy gets freed up. So I was always talking about what would you do with 2/3 of your week back or your day back if you didn't spend it? It's completely wasted.
There's a common notion that a lot of startups do not want to hire people from big companies because the skill that they bring is how to LHF. It's what they call playing politics, bureaucracy. You're like, I don't want, that muscle is not what I want to hire, but that's what oftentimes they get most equipped in. Poker players are best at bluffing above all else. And that is not a skill that actually is, yes, it has its place, but it's overdone. So that muscle is overdeveloped and we've underdeveloped the other side, which is being ourselves. And like I said, AI, technology, everything is further making ourselves disappear. So hopefully that movie I saw on Netflix, the Idiocracy, doesn't happen, but there's a danger that we could get in that direction. But talking about, so how do you do this? So we're going to go into implementation. This is where we cross the chasm between theory and going into practice, and practice is complicated. So this slide's a little busy, right? So first part on top is the repetition of what you just saw. So there's two parts to implementation. The first part is understand who, as in the team. The team matters here. And so I'm going to focus your attention right here. If you see right here in the middle, right? Small group. There's 3 different ways to think about an audience of who. One is what I call the really small, it's like the one-on-one, which is what we call the TP, the training partner, right? So you can think of that even as a private tutor, executive coach, a private coach, right? There's that one-on-one relationship. Small group, which the ideal size is 4. We've looked at research on multiple different directions of what is the right size. We found the ideal size is 4. We saw this through work we did with the military. We saw this in work we did in looking at how hackathons and small startups have done too. 4 is that ideal size for the small group. And then large group is like just bigger, right? And large group has all kinds of research too. Dunbar's law, after 150 people, you almost do worse. And so there's all different ways to break up large groups, but think of large group as where it's more dangerous and hostile. But why I talk about the small group is when it comes to practice, it matters where you start. Sequence matters. If you start at a small group, you can work your way to get to the one-on-one, which is the TP, or to a large group. But if you start in the wrong place, you tend to face plant, you tend to actually go backwards. So I'm going to go into depth, and I'm glad Coach Mackey's here with us, who's actually one of the top youth sports coaches, arguably in the world, I think, but has also coached one of the top current NBA players through his program, Steady Buckets. And so I was listening to his talk from last week, which I highly encourage you guys to do. It's on the video hub, but his talk triggered more depth of understanding why this small group matters. So this is a slide, screenshot. Mackey's in the upper right, so you'll see him currently in our class. He just joined us today. Coach Mackey, 10 years, he created a program called Steady Buckets. They coached 2,500 kids, a nonprofit. But he got fed up with the way youth sports is run and stopped coaching NBA players and just literally said, I'm going to dedicate my life to coaching kids for free. And I mean, literally one of the most successful nonprofits and youth sports programs, now growing bigger. But at the bottom of the slide, I put in, if you want to watch the video, it's an hour and a half, but the actual talk is only really 20, 30 minutes. Just watch 20 minutes of this. Series number 13 of Developing Toughness in Children. So Mackey in his talk, I just screenshot his talk from last week. He talks about this term. I think we had maybe shared it with him at first, called the zone of proximal development. And so this is literally him searching, I think it's in Wikipedia, if you Google search it, and this diagram comes up. So let me explain to you what this diagram means. At the center circle is what an individual can learn unaided on their own. In this, so that is this green, inside the green circle. Then at the outer circle from that green is what someone can learn with the help of somebody else, a teacher, a coach, a parent, a manager. And then at the outer circle is what, of course, you don't know and you can't learn. The goal when you learn is to actually grow these two inner circles, right? If you can grow the green circle bigger and bigger, it's saying the person could do things with the help of someone, but now they can do it unaided. So the green circle growing is a good thing. At the same time, part of the lifelong journey is finding a way to grow your blue circle, meaning finding better coaches, teachers, mentors, finding people who can teach you something that is beyond what your capacity is now is also a very important goal, right? So doing more myself, but finding others who can teach me more is kind of why we search like TED Talks and speakers, and maybe even why you come to COA and all the LIP classes and so forth, right? You're trying to grow your blue circle, you're trying to grow your green circle, right? But in the talk itself, he talks about something else which I love. So this is a combination of Mackey's knowledge combined with a guy named Frank Shamrock, who was the #1 middleweight MMA fighter. So an MMA mixed martial arts fighter, and he talks about the ideal way to learn, as in how do you find the right environment to maximize learning? And the MMA fighter said, the best way to learn is to be part of a team where someone is better than me, someone's worse than me, and someone's equal to me. Then I liked Mackey's application of that because, and this is the capital part is all Mackey, when someone is better than you, I can learn from them. When someone's worse, I can teach them. And when someone's equal, I can compete. Now, when I say I can, that's theoretical. When you do it in practice and those who are the best, they apply it.
They're deliberate about it.
There's a deliberate application. If you happen to be in a ritual, right? This is weekly if ideal, right? The highest performers will be a weekly ritual. Every week I'm learning from someone actively, right? So for example, if you're quietly listening, but not engaging, asking questions, clarifying, that's not active learning. I am actively teaching. So if someone asks me a question, I help them, is not actively teaching. Actively teaching is me seeking out those doing worse, and I'm gonna try to proactively help. Then there's the opposite, which is with those who are equal, I compete. Not compete by accident, but I'm actively competing. Sometimes in practice, they call that trash talking. Megan and I compete a lot in everything. So we trash talk and we try to up each other's game to compete more. Done with consistency. And remember, so the topic is, so what do you know, when you find a team, this ideal team of 4, so I am the person going in, and this is, remember, the ideal scenario. Ideally, the team of 4, me entering the equation, has 3 other people, you plus 3, someone who's better than me, someone who's worse than me, someone who's equal to me. So the question is, on what though, right? What are they better than me at? What are they worse, and what are they equal? So as I said, in the pedagogy, the curriculum, they're better than me at being real, at being themselves. Their visceral compass, their intuition, their judgment, their system 1 fast thinking is better than me, they're worse than me, they're equal to me, right? So this is what I want you to think about in the ideal. It's hard to get to ideal, but that's what you want to find. Now, if I fast forward, some of you may think, well, you know what, I get this better from an executive coach, or I have a mentor who kind of provides all that, or I have a private XYZ that I go to, right? Whether it's a private nutritionist, a coach, this and that. And Mackey talks about this in his talk, and I love why peers come before the coach. There's a sequence in this. The working private one-on-one with a coach comes later. Why peers come first? So think of right now in the pandemic, a lot of people are getting private tutors for their kids, private coaches. A lot of executives always seek out executive coaches or mentors. Here's what happens, and I love this insight Mackey shared. When you learn from a peer or learn with peers, there's a sense of urgency as I want to do that now. When you learn from, in this case of kids for adults, or learn with a coach, you have no urgency. I'll be able to do that when I'm older. I'll be able to do that when I'm CEO. I'll be able to do that when I get certified. It's subtle, but it's very important. They found the same thing occurring. This zone of proximal development, said another way, is finding someone who's 1 or 2 levels above you. If they're too far above, Mackey found this in sports. Basically, a 10-year-old is best coached and influenced by an 11 or 12 years old. 1 or 2 years experience in front. If they're too far in front, it doesn't work. It's 1 or 2. And it works on both sides. The coach has more empathy and understands what's happening as opposed to getting too frustrated. But the student, the learner, is actually motivated, saying they're not that far away from me. I can do that too. They say in building a startup company, you want to get advice from someone who's 1 or 2 fundraising rounds in front of you. If you did a Series A, you want to be mentored by someone who did a Series B or a C. The same methodology works and shows up in a lot of places. This idea is because the intrinsic mental psychology is, I can do that too, and I want to do it now. Versus when you feel like, oh, that's interesting, but I'll get to do it when I'm older or later. Later is never for most of us. So this idea of peers first, and then, by the way, what comes second is then adding the coach later. So this slide I showed you before, why it's important to start here. We experimented forever on the importance of TPs. A TP is what we have, training partners, like finding a gym buddy. In fact, in Megan and I at Gym Buddies, there are many places where I am learning from Megan and Megan is learning from me.
I was just going to say there's some of the questions that are going on. This is such an interesting topic, so there's a lot of questions, and it's, people are asking, well, what if you're the worst overall, right, and everything? And what's fascinating about that is obviously that's not true. You can't. There are certain areas, right? So like so I'm a few years younger than Charlie. I started as an intern. He was the CEO, and so there's like we're in that still in that proximal zone.
I'm 4 years older, which is why 4 years life experience is what I always say.
Yeah,
is why I'm doing better.
And
so
by
when
the
she
way,
loses, just to make her
by
feel
the
better.
way, somebody's asking who wins when we are competing and everything. It's like 50-50.
51.
51 over the side. So it's always cutting in. We actually have a scoreboard now, which is getting a little unhealthy, but it's okay. But in the beginning, it didn't start that way. But the point I was going to make actually, and it's fascinating, it's making me think about it as the questions are coming in. I clearly was not as good as Charlie. He was running the company. I was an intern, but then after 9/11, down to a few of us, it was fascinating. One of the things I was better at, and I will say this now, this was back in the day in fitness when step classes were in at New York Sports Club. He started coming to the gym with me. So we started to build this routine. We could get better work after our workout, go to step class. I was better. That made me feel good. And it's crazy how these little things you're better at actually helps you create, more team. Versus otherwise, you wouldn't work together because like, if I suck at everything relative to you because you have more experience, you're better at this, that's not healthy. And you wouldn't stay.
This idea
you wouldn't be competing in anything.
In the team of 4, when someone is worse than you, it gives you confidence.
Yes.
Just like when someone is better than you, it gives you humility.
Yeah.
Right? When someone is equal, you get to test out your chops and see how good you really are. Right? And compete. Right? Fair game. It's kind of like why they have handicaps in golf and so forth. Right. But what's fascinating is this. So when most people think about, like, I'm bad at everything, you're thinking about the wrong pedagogy or the wrong topic. When it comes to technical skills, by the way, this is where so Mackey even shares, if you want to learn how to shoot better on basketball, a private coach can help you on that technical skill. But end of the day, that does nothing. A technical skill is rarely the reason why someone succeeds nor fails. Mike Tyson has a famous quote that everyone has a plan on how to win this match until they get punched in the face. If you watch Cobra Kai, right? This is a remake of Karate Kid in series. The first thing the guy teaches is, have you been punched in the face? And all these little nerds are like, no. They stand in line if they get punched in the face one by one. The point is that until when we get punched in the face is where we forget everything. Your plan disappears. So a technical skill is not the reason we fail. We fail because life punches us in the face. And when I said the uncomfortable, navigating the uncomfortable, unexpected is a punch in the face. It's a punch in the gut. And that notion, right, of learning how to still be yourself as that's happening. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. So when you say you're the worst at everything, well, are you good at being yourself? Well, that's the question. Yeah. And there are places you can be more yourself and there are places you will struggle, right? But when you're in a peer set of people, someone who's no more than 1 to 2 levels above you, right? Whether it's years of experience or levels, whatever it might be, level-wise, you're gonna find by chance, no matter what, you're not all gonna be equal. You're not all, there's no way like everyone can be the worst. You're gonna find levels. You're gonna find levels in there. So coming back to this, I'm gonna go into part 2, right? Once you figure out this team of 4, and to start, by the way, do not fret over the oh my God, I have to get this perfect team. So why I call this the starter home. And I'll tell you why it's home, but starter home, because when you buy a starter home or you get into a starter home, the plan is not to live here forever. Yeah. The part is to experiment and plan the starter home so I can go eventually to a real home, right? Real home is moving to the left to the TP eventually, where you will get to a place where you'll find a gym buddy or training partner that literally can do all 3 things for you in one person. They can help you. Look, like Megan is both my mentor, but also my student, but also a competitor. Like you can get to that place, but you gotta first start with your starter home. So once you get the team set, that's step 1. Step 2 is what do I do? And this is now the details of the battle rhythm, right? So the battle rhythm is made up like this. We're gonna get very specific and prescriptive. On Monday, you want to meet as this small group of 4. Think of this as unstructured time, right? Yeah. Open time, meaning it's not like we'll meet for an hour. You pick a time slot. Ideally, it's like after the day's over. We often meet sometimes around 7, sometimes even 8, because then it keeps it open-ended. If you meet at the wrong time, everyone's got to leave. So open time, and the number 1 topic you want to cover is the uncomfortable stuff. And that could be uncomfortable stuff for self. It could be something uncomfortable I have with somebody else, which is what we call an eggshell. I want to crush eggshells. I want to go into uncomfortable. And it's a group of 4, right? And you will find, once again, someone is going to be better, someone's going to be worse, someone's going to be equal to you. And you have to deliberately and actively try to learn, try to teach, and try to compete while doing this. I know it's kind of weird to think of competing in that, but there's always like a mental competition going on anyways in life. So just think of being real. Then, and so at the bottom, we wrote LBR. It talks about bringing it to light, which is, on Monday, you're just bringing the uncomfortable stuff, put it on the table as a group of 4, as fast as possible. B is the break. In this case, break happens to be Tuesday. Then by Wednesday, this group of 4, you schedule a workout and there's a rotating leader, meaning like what's beautiful about, what you can do with video conferencing now, you can share a screen like I've done. I can share a screen of whatever workout I want to do. Then next Wednesday, Megan gets to pick whatever workout she wants to do. And this rotation is very important. Oftentimes one person says, I'll pick all the workouts. And then the other 3 just complain. I don't like that. I don't like dance. And like, well, when your turn, you have to go and service all of us. You'll see that rotation creates a sense of responsibility, but also makes it more interesting. It also gets a diversity of what happens. And the workout, by the way, is simply good health, right? We talk about the human health pyramid, PEMS, if you remember in the earlier LIP classes, physical at the bottom. So you're adding the workout. It could be 30 to 45 minutes. But here's the real important thing. Leaving time afterwards to continue discussion, which is what we call the R and LBR.
And that's the revisit, right?
Yes.
Because everybody's wondering sort of, you need to have safety in these discussions, right? Yes, you do. And so that's the small group, but you also need recovery. You need a break. So if you bring it to light on Monday, Monday night, usually kind of the unconstrained, unstructured time, you need some time to let that process. But by Wednesday, what ends up happening is most people don't revisit it. It's like those conversations never happened. And so you open up a can of worms that never gets resolved, and because it's really hard to do, which is why if you have a Wednesday workout scheduled, it's not like you're going into like, oh, we're going to talk about that. You want to talk about that, but what gets you there is we all said we're going to do this. It's on our calendar. We're going to do an exercise, but you have to deliberately remember to talk about some of the things that you talked about on Monday. That's the revisit.
Giving the time. Like, so don't use the time to talk about the weather afterwards or talk about nonsense. Literally, it's an opportunity for you to revisit and be deliberate about it. And the idea of the workout before is that it might be a way to create some laughter, some playfulness. You might see their face, while playing the video and think, God, I hate them from last conversation on Monday. Maybe they hate me. But then suddenly you realize like it was kind of fun working out together. And then you go into the conversation, and the first person to be authentic will create authenticity. The first person to LHF will create LHF in the group. So go into, hey, that conversation on Monday, I thought about it, right? It's amazing what revisiting does. When you don't revisit uncomfortable conversations, we all walk away with horrible, broken mental models. God, every time I talk to Megan about that, she blows up and she hates me and I hate her, so I'll never bring that up. That's the beginnings of eggshells and permanent eggshell topics. This LBR, critical, Monday, Wednesday. And so once again, what are you trying to insert into this? It's up here, right? So being real, visceral compass, uncomfortable, navigating uncomfortable together. So I'll leave you with, actually this quote at the bottom I like. So one of the other co-op talks, I highly encourage you to watch it. A good friend of ours, he spoke, he's a former deputy director of the CIA, very, very senior guy. Glenn Gaffney gave an awesome talk. And in the talk, he talks about the ultimate way to learn is to learn in public. The way he defines it is I can make a mistake and correct in front of others. I can make a mistake in front of others, and I can also correct myself in front of others. The others is a small group. Eventually, you want to get to a place where you can actually make a mistake and change your opinion in a large group, a huge setting, but that's very hard to do. You need a starter home, which is a small group of 4 to learn to do this. So think of what the small group is doing is providing that. So the last slide I will leave you with is this. There's a book by, I think it's pronounced Mackenzie, but I'm not quite sure. Charlie Mackenzie. It's a children's book. Someone gave it to both Megan and I as a gift. It's called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And in the book, it literally all looks like this, diagrams like this. I took a picture of this page that really kind of struck a chord for me. And it said, home isn't always a place, is it? Home isn't always a place, a physical place. And so it made me think about a conversation we had with this amazing officer in the Navy.
You want me to share this?
Yeah, sure.
It's up to you.
No,
It was
no,
so
no.
cool. This is his name, and I remember his name because it's my uncle's name. But this guy, John Riley, is an officer in the Navy, aviation pilot, and he said, you know, we were talking about the call signs that everybody has, and it's a privilege to get that. You have to earn a call sign, which I think is
It's like a
really
nickname.
neat. It's like, but you have to do something pretty stupid or kind of embarrassing to earn that call sign. You don't just get one.
As in
And
show
so, as
real.
in show who you are, like your real self has to come out, and then you get that kind of that badge of honor in many ways. But he talked about how, and I was asking some of the names of them, and I'm like, what does that mean? As they tell the story, you're like, wow, it's a bunch of, you know, you're like, wow, these are
Embarrassing story.
embarrassing, crazy stories. Who are these people? And then you realize, he said, you know, we're all misfits. So you are our misfit, you know, in the team. You are our misfit. We're all misfits. I was like, that is like, it gives you chills, right? Because it's like, if you can,
So profound.
if somebody can accept you and they know really who you are, the mistakes you've made, the stupid things you've done, the funny things, the angry things, whatever it might be, just you, and they accept that, and then they call you something related to that, it's saying, I accept you, you're ours, like you are our misfit. To find that team, that's the home. That's what home is, right? Finding that team where you can be yourself, which is you're a misfit, and that's okay.
So I leave you with this last thought, which is home is not a place, not a physical place. It is people. It is finding my tribe, my team, where I can be my authentic misfit self. That's what home is. And the best of the best always talks about find home. I don't know if you've ever heard that from an amazing coach. Find home. Find your way home. And it's not to say go back to where you grew up or your parents' house. Find your tribe where you can literally be, not the 11-year-old me, but the me now, 47, the 47-year-old me now. My faults, my strengths, all of me. Being me is what I can do. And this group of 4 is that starter home to begin the process of finding home. And ultimately, you want to get to a place where you can get even tighter to a TP.
They accept you for who you are, but they also push you to get better, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
We had a lot of discussions of that they give you a kick in the pants,
yeah,
right? Tough love,
yeah,
but they also are a shoulder to lean on.
yeah, I love that.
But the thing is, above all else, they keep it real.
Keep it real.
They keep it real, right? Good or bad, you're gonna get the truth from them, right? And this idea, and the single biggest factor in getting truth is time, meaning people tell you too late. So I keep using this word near real time. That is the hardest thing to do. Be yourself, tell someone the truth in near real time is the hardest thing to do. So time is the factor that moves away from theory to practice. And when you find that home and you have to build that home, right? That's what's kind of most important. And the point is, do that well, you will be excellent at what matters most in the 21st century, which is strategy, which is innovation, which is creativity. All right, so with that, we will open to questions. And I think someone had said sometimes it helps to have a slide up as we talk in questions. So I will do this. I will pull up this maybe so you can see the main slide, maybe to reference as we ask questions. Does that make sense?
Questions, Mackie, welcome to, so happy to have you with us. We're like, talking about you here. So I'm sure you're frothing at the mouth to jump in. So feel free. I just want to.
Yeah, so maybe one quick thought, use chat if you don't mind, 30 seconds. Punching what's on your mind question. We'll try to call on certain people, unmute them. Sorry, this is a little bit over time. We've been going over a little bit, but.
I love what Donovan now is, instead of Darth Vader, he's simply a misunderstood genius.
Love it.
God.
Love it.
I feel like that's what I was back then. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I feel like I still am now.
Yeah.
I'll give you 30 seconds. Go into the chat.
Yeah, go into the chat. Becky, it's good to see you. Some of the people I can't see because we have a camera there. Sorry for Josh. It's good to see you guys. Yeah, people are putting in questions. Coach Mackie.
So I'll give you a chance to put some chat in. Questions.
Oh, Mackie's going to continue talking about this. It's presenting on the mindset of being dual-purposed. Interesting. We talk about the dual purpose.
Mackie, unmute. Share with the group just maybe while people are putting in more questions. Your thoughts, your thinking.
Yeah, I'm kind of, it's always funny to me how similar our presentations are, but I'm going to build on some of this today at my 3 o'clock class. And what I'm going to be talking about is, to me, what really made the whole young leaders concept and this idea of the best way to learn is to teach is such a cliche, and the expression's been around for 2,000 years. And yet we don't always have the guts to let young people teach because they're not as good at it. So what I'm going to talk about today is the importance of approaching learning as dual purposed. And I think that fits into a lot of this team where people are saying, well, are you the best or the worst? Well, why can't you be both? And why can't the team take this dual purposed approach where as a teacher, I am trying to help somebody else, but at the same time, develop as an individual myself. Sometimes we think of teaching as the teacher is helping the student. But we don't think about the student is giving the teacher the opportunity to develop on their own. The last thing I'll say, when people thank me as a coach, I've been using this expression for a while now, but people thank me and say, thank you, coach. And I say, no, thank you, because without me, you're still a player. Without you, I'm not a coach. So this idea that as a coach, I actually need them more than they need me. Even though as coaches and mentors, we tend to get a lot of credit for being the person who's building a program. And I think it's just important to understand that it's this cyclical, we need each other. And that once you, and the last thing I'll say is kind of with my whole young leaders program, I got a lot of pushback early, especially. People would say, why are you doing this? These kids are not good coaches. And the best way for people to get on board with my vision was to say, you have to understand this is a dual purposed program. Just like your child is a beginner at basketball, these other kids are beginners at leadership. And I, as the leader of the organization, as the director, I equally value your child's development as a basketball player and that other child's development as a leader. And I'm creating a situation where they can thrive together. So that's I'll kind of get more into that in depth. But I think just the simple term of dual purposed really makes a lot of this stuff come together. And we tend to do things with one purpose in mind. But if you take a dual purposed approach, it kind of frees you up to be more creative.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Highly encourage. So Mackie gives his series at 3. Highly encourage anybody to try to go.
I think it's a Chris.
It's Chris to everyone. Your name is just Chris. Can you unmute and ask your question? That's a great question, actually. You're talking about constructive truth?
Yeah, it was really about filtering. You were saying that you needed to take off your filters where, just say what's on your mind. And a lot of times those things are just mean, but that's not really what you're trying to do. You're trying to be constructive with it. So there is still some level of filter that, well, I imagine you need.
Well, so here, this is a fascinating point and a really important discussion from theory going into practice. The minute you say it's got to be constructive, right?
Filters
Remember,
go on.
constructive is from the point of view of the recipient, not the giver, right? So trying to second guess what the other person is going to think was helpful or not is a near impossibility, right? Unless you happen to be the only one who can read people's minds, right? Like it literally is near impossible. So the act of even putting that word constructive suddenly makes it not a practice ground. You know the idea that when you go, you know why we like to practice karaoke or singing in the shower? There's nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
Like versus, you know what? No, I want you to practice singing in front of here, the Zoom audience, with everyone watching you and recorded. Something you can't practice. It puts that chokehold on you. We need place to be unconstructive. We need spaces to fail, to be messy, and we lack that. And because we start putting these adult filters, well, no, all feedback has to be constructive, it has to be helpful, it has to be this, it has to be that. And suddenly it's like, oh, well, you can't curse, you can't get angry, you can't get sad, you have to be right in the middle, you have to be right monotone. And suddenly, like,
not being yourself. Yeah, you can't say
every which way I want to go, I can't speak so.
Right.
It's creating the space to be messy.
But this is why deliberately we baked in the break and the revisit, because to think that somebody is going to take your truth, that visceral truth, and just accept it on the spot is ridiculous. That's not going to happen, especially in the beginning. It's like a muscle. So you need that break, as opposed to feel, well, why aren't you getting it right now? Do you understand? Have you gone through the denial that you don't think this is true, the anger, sadness, and acceptance, all in the few minutes that I have to share this with you is not realistic. That's not human. So that's why there's a break. You know, the break even on just a full day. We would always say sometimes just a few minute break to the bathroom. I come back saying, I can see your point now. It's just a quick oscillation, but we put in a whole day as in just go the whole day Tuesday, right? Not talking to that group about the same issue, but you know on Wednesday you're going to revisit it. And just knowing you're going to revisit it, it's like a chance to, if you have to apologize, and maybe you do that ahead of time, but like, it's almost, it's forcing another discussion.
And think of it this way. We are surrounded as adults, and every place we go, it's just socially unacceptable to not filter, right? To not be politically correct, right? To not be, you know, kind and generous and, you know, all that good stuff as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reality of what happens in our head, and I think I shared with you the data of Facebook and Google, right? I mean, two of the biggest internet companies, right? And what people are actually putting in and saying.
Mm-hmm.
So where is that place besides me being alone? And what do you think happens when it never has a chance to actually rub up against peers and find out if what I'm thinking on my own that I'm not saying is good or bad? How do I be real? How do I be authentic and get better at it? Now, some people say, no, if I'm offensive, that's me. No, you can get better at everything,
Yeah.
including this other half that we never share. You need to be able to expose it. It's the big movement that occurred in restaurants. Hidden kitchens was the 20th century. Exposed kitchens is the new thing. Open kitchens.
Yeah, you can see them cooking. You can see them cooking.
You cannot work on something you cannot see. You cannot work on something that's hidden. You need to expose it. So there's this other half. Where does my unconstructive feedback go? Where does my unhelpful, maybe bordering on mean, yes, I didn't mean to be mean, or maybe there are places I got so pissed I wanted to be mean. Where does that go besides by myself? And where can I actually put it on the table and get the help of colleagues to work on it? And colleagues who aren't like, and this is once again, the adults in the room versus the kids, meaning the coach versus the peer set.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when the adults there, like, this is the worst. They do that. Shouldn't have done that. No, that's wrong word choice. Tone. It's like this condescending thing, like kind of, I have wisdom beyond your years. 10 years later, you'll get to my state. So I'm just going to judge. And no, not that word, not that frown, not this. Versus like, you know, when someone's like, I was about to say that too. Like, you know, they said what I was going to say. I'm glad they said it first. Like, and that notion of peer set allows messy, right? Brent, you had a question that tied to this, and I know Tiffany and Lori asked very similar questions. Brent, do you want to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking a lot with my graduate students about being unfiltered, and we have to do like a lot of discussion boards, like everybody writes stuff out, and it's all like presentational. It's all, you know, I'm just trying to get them like quick, visceral, all the stuff that we've been talking about for a number of weeks. And so I had a real heart-to-heart with many of them over the last week. And guys, they're like terrified of upsetting even people in the class. And I'm like, guys, this is a sandbox, play space. And I'm just really having a hard time getting them to round the corner. They're scared out of their mind.
Yeah.
So I know, once again, I know in here, Tiffany asked this question and then Laurie asked a similar question.
Yeah.
So don't forget the implementation part. Part 1, part 2, right? Part 1 is who, right? Part 2 is then what you do as a ritual. People want to jump straight to the ritual. And so let me give you an example of a common mistake. Who wants to be part of my 4? You, sure, why not, right? No thought, but volunteer. How about we do it alphabetically? Well, you're the first 3 I saw, right? We all like, we all like Chinese food, so we'll go and like we eat lunch at the same time. I like coffee, you like coffee, done, right? Don't be so pedantic or pedestrian in how you pick your team, right? Like that'd be like if you actually have to spend money and buy a starter home. Yeah, I'll just buy any home. It's a starter
Why
home.
are you saying all this though? So
It matters. Part 1, spend the time
to figure out who that team
and
is.
so then someone says, well, I'll spend years. No, like human beings judge human beings. So there was data on when you do recruiting, when you recruit someone, do an interview and you decide to hire or not, right? I mean, that's a big judgment of a human being, right? You're good for my company and team, yes or no, right? They say that men make that decision in less than 30 seconds of the interview. Women take 2 minutes. Either way, in 2 minutes or less, you already have initial judgment, right? But what is helpful is this, meaning just to let a group mingle, right? Just for 2 minutes or less. And they already have their initial cut of who is definitely a yes and who is definitely a no. By the simple way they dress, look, first words out of their mouth, their tone, they have a yes, no list instantly. And so when I think about who, this is the process I always think about. The first thing I want to build, and we call this the CAB process, my C list, right? These are the people, based on what I've seen, I think it's a definite no, right? And what happens is then the list shrinks because the C's are the ones I say, they're going to take my vulnerability and hurt me, right? So that's my C. Then I look at the smaller list and I say, who could be on my A list, right? And so then I start jotting down with my quick intuition who those are. Then I've got a long B list. The B list, which is why it's CAB. The B list is the I don't know, kind of mixed. And then I take that. So I've already made a split-second decision, right, which I could change later. But I say, okay, I'm not going to vet out the C's because that's a no.
Can I stop?
Go ahead.
Because I feel like the punchline though, Brent, is something similar to what Mackie did. You're supervising them, right? And saying that you're watching them try to be authentic and visceral, right? Like you're the authority figure. And what I'm saying is I know Mackie had done this with a small group of 4 girls, all played basketball, put them into a breakout room, go, right? And then he put a topic in. Talk about something that you feel shameful of. Oh, that's a big one, right? Versus like, what do you like to do on the weekends? We all like basketball. What do you like to do on the weekends? No, it's where do you feel shame in your life?
Okay,
and so
this is
unstructured,
really
right? They ended up talking about how
really
I'm a female, I play basketball, I'm tall, and I get made fun of because of that. Or it was something in that vein, but they are not being supervised having that conversation because I think you're right. They're worried about you judging them. Like, I'm not gonna, yeah.
This is where like,
Talking about.
I'm really good. That was the part 2 part of this answer.
Part 2. Part 1 is they
1A, 1B.
They need unsupervised time. Yeah. And figuring out what that team is the people who are in the arena with you. There's some commonality.
But meaning like as the adult, as the senior person, inject the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
When Mackie said, what are you ashamed of? It's not like, go talk. What makes you happy? How do you have fun? It's not that.
Yeah.
What are you ashamed of?
The control you have as the teacher, right? As the professor is this is what I want you to talk about.
Yes.
And they might get crickets, right? You might get them talking about nothing, but at some point somebody will try something. Somebody is better in that group, right? Of being themselves, being authentic. Somebody will get it going. If nobody does, and everybody's LHFing and playing it.
But what I'm saying is, I think you think about, we always think about a gated process, right? A gated process is like a ramp. The first thing you're doing is you're creating the equivalent of tryouts.
Yeah.
You got to let the audience have tryouts of their own. Inject a difficult topic and let them move around on that uncomfortable topic. They will quickly figure out who's my C, who's my A, and who's an unknown B. And then go a second round. And before you know it, it won't take more than 1 or 2 rounds before they have a pretty good list of a starter home of 4. Part 1, get that who right, get the team of 4. Then do the ritual. people skip the part one and the importance of it. And even part one has a ramp of gated process, right? But I love that important insight. You got to inject a difficult, uncomfortable thing. Now, if you really want to get truly uncomfortable, Black Lives Matter,
Yeah, I was gonna
right?
say,
Injustice, throw that in. What's your view of that?
We
right?
had our team talk
Like
about
just,
that.
wow.
We said, you're going to talk about that in small groups, go, as
You-
opposed to you just get to not be part of that discussion.
You're going to find authenticity or LHF come out like so fast,
Yeah.
right? Or complete silence, which is LHF too,
Mhm.
right? So like, I think there's these difficult topics you throw in and see what happens. Go ahead, Matthew. Yeah.
If I can jump in and just on kind of to talk about what Megan mentioned at camp, I think one of the things I learned this summer with the breakout rooms and getting the kids to be authentic and really challenging them was I feel like when we don't see things, we sometimes think good things aren't happening as leaders, right? If I'm not there to witness it, it's not happening. And it's so hard knowing that like the best stuff is happening when you're not there. You almost feel like jealous that, man, all this great stuff is happening and it's happening without me. But if I was there, it wouldn't have happened. So it's like, it was so hard for me to just like, I always wanted to peek in on them and listen in, but I just knew that that would mess the whole thing up. And it took a level of like giving, I don't know, it's kind of like doing less is sometimes more. Can these kids thrive without me is the ultimate goal. But there's a little piece of me that says, well, then I guess I'm not that important. And that sucks because I like to think that, man, without me, none of the good stuff would happen.
And yet you're important for the structure, and you're important to create the structure.
Yes.
Like without your structure and without the rituals that you're baking in, they can't get there, right?
Mhm.
And that's the hard thing, even as a parent, right? Structure for homework time and all that.
This
You
is
know,
a
it's
good future topic. for
It's a
that
good
class.
topic, yeah.
Because there's a part, if you overstructure it, you will be stifling,
Yep.
right? And you will
But
limit
if you
it.
understructure it, it's not going to happen,
It's
right?
like it won't work. So that's a
Yeah.
whole nother topic we'll cover in future lib class. There.
Yeah.
Um,
There's like an art to that, right? Yeah.
I don't know who Jordaj01 is. This is a. If
Do you
you're
want to
here,
unmute yourself if you're still here? Normally ask how
And if
someone
you-
in my team wants to be managed and how they want me to give constructive feedback. Always honest.
so Jordaji01 may have left, but this is an interesting point. This idea of asking someone what they want, right? And thinking that's how I do it.
Mm.
I tell you in practice, it doesn't work most of the time. And they show this in the data on surveys. What people write in surveys to what they actually do when you observe their behavior are usually polar opposite. They actually say what you think they're supposed to say, or what they think you want to hear, not what they would actually do,
Mhm.
which is why the difference of when you actually observe real behavior is not the same as asking them, so how would you like me to talk to you, right? Versus like, it's just different. So be careful of this whole, I just ask and that's what I give. People don't know what they want until it happens. People don't know until you see the trail of their behaviors. I think Jen Findlay from ADP talked about a journal entry every week, right? I don't know if Jen is still here. It's an interesting point.
I
on
had
the-
to unmute, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Hi. Yeah, I was telling Brent that one of my favorite grad school assignments was, even though it took us a couple of weeks to get used to it, was when our instructor had us do a journal entry every week versus the discussion board. He had us do a journal entry, and it was like, how did you use this tool this week in your everyday life? And that became my favorite. Actually, that became all of our favorite.
So can I give you the plus and minus of something like that? It's no different than the notion of meditation. It has its place, right? Self-awareness is a journey that has its place. It's usually done by self. Meditation's a big way. When you actually have to paper something and you get to reread it, there's absolute value in that one hand. The other hand, the notion of leadership and practice also is focused on high performance and fast. How do I figure this out fast? The fastest way for a human being to learn how to get more real, be more themselves, work on system one faster is actually by rubbing up against other human beings doing the same back at them. There is no, it's almost like rubbing two sticks and creating fire. And the small group of 4, when 4 people, right? And ideally someone's better, someone's worse, someone's equal. And when they're all actively playing the learn, teach, and compete and being real, nothing in the world speeds that up. Better to develop our intuition, our judgment, our system 1 than other human beings. There's no machine, there's no video, there's no book, there's no self-driven tool that's faster than other people, which is why the 21st century is the century of people. But it's not really people. The real power is in teams. So the term that's used a lot is teaming. Teaming is the key. And the team of 4, when you get to the right group, you cannot find a journal, a process, of this that would beat that team of 4. And you find this in almost every field, every industry. A sharp team of 4, the slide I put in the beginning, 2 light bulbs bashing their heads and finding greatest idea in the middle.
Yeah, we have a form of journaling with our On My Mind app, but the journaling is going to another human being. It doesn't just stay with you, right? And that's a weekly ritual that we have, bi-weekly or twice a week ritual. Now during work from home, it's 3 times a week. And that does actually give us a sense of what is on people's minds, not just the work, but the actual what's happening in their head, right? All the twisted and kind of schizo thoughts we all have, and they're sharing that. And that is healthy for self-awareness.
Sure.
That's,
That's-
you know,
so-
these are
so-
all the things that we baked into our culture.
And so Jen, I don't know if you guys did this, but this is
Yeah.
interesting where you write your journal and then imagine going and sharing it with your small group of 4 and letting everyone read each other's and then talk about it in real time. My reaction, my criticism, my this, that's hard stuff, right? So maybe Brent, that's a good way to do it too. If you want to see like kind of this idea of On My Mind is simply just journaling what your emotions are, you know, today. You write it down, right? And then you're going to send it to your small group of 4, and then you're going to talk about it, right? And you're going to comment, react, you're going to correct, you're going to argue, you're going to compliment, and that realness, you need this injection. And so just like the workout is the content injection to create an opportunity to be real, the journaling is also great content to be real with other people.
They're saying Jen's saying they share it with each other, which is important. Otherwise, yeah.
I'll do it.
I think, good. Go ahead, Brent.
I'll absolutely figure out a way to do it. That's awesome. Thank you.
But I think that people always don't understand and see not enough. There's nothing more powerful than finding that peer set team of 4. When you do, it will grow you at a rate that it's like literally going on steroids for your brain, steroids for your mental development, your brain power development. And doing it alone is just not going to come close to competing against a well-formed team.
Doing it, yeah.
And that team of 4 get done enough, the starter home will get you to a place where you can eventually hone down to the team of 2, which is the one-on-one, which is the equivalent of finding the perfect private coach, but you're mutually each other's. You think of like Michael Phelps and what was the other guy's name? Is it Lockheed or something? Or Lockheed? Like they attribute each other as both a teacher, student, and competitor.
Yeah.
You'll find a similar theme, right? Whether it's in any sport, any field, that's where the highest performance of growth occurs. All right. I know we went way over. We want to get some feedback. Laura gives an opportunity.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful. That was dense, we realized, but
Find your starter home. Is that
yes.
the
If it's too dense, my
the bottom
fault.
line up front? Find your starter home.
Yes.
Build
If
your
it-
starter
yes.
home.
I was gonna
Start the
say,
battle rhythm ritual.
but I was gonna say, just for the sake of competition, if it was too dense, you blame me,
Yeah.
right? So give me the ones. But if it wasn't dense, it was perfect. Give me the 4. Give her the 1. Because
Yeah.
or
That's
actually,
fine, that's
no,
fine.
that's not true. If it was good, it was probably her reason.
See,
If
it's
it was
getting
bad,
so
it's my
insecure
fault.
lately. Where was this 20 years ago?
going
It takes
schizo.
time
I'm
to
going
build
schizo.
humility, guys. It takes
Yes.
time. If you're arrogant, it takes time to build humility. If you're on the humble side, like me, on the insecure side, it takes time to build confidence, right? But hopefully, it just doesn't take 20 years. I'm just kidding.
We're trying to teach how to do everything faster, which is important for the